ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening. We begin tonight with trying to keep the focus on Saddam Hussein. Ever since President Bush put together an Arab coalition to stand against the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait, the U.S. has asked the Israeli government not to make trouble in the region, which could make it tougher for the coalition to prevail. But the Israelis are making all sorts of waves. They oppose a United Nations team to investigate the killing of Palestinians in Jerusalem a week ago, and now a plan for more Jewish housing in a Palestinian part of Jerusalem, perhaps misusing American loan guarantees. The Bush administration believes that all of this plays right into Saddam Hussein's hands. The Israeli government is not giving ground. Here's ABC's Dean Reynolds.
This afternoon, Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir told the world to mind its own business. Addressing the Israeli Knesset, Shamir said the United Nations is guilty of hypocrisy when it condemns Israel but ignores abuses in Arab countries. And he reiterated the government decision to ignore a UN delegation appointed to investigate last Monday's bloodshed. 21 Palestinians were killed in a clash with Israeli police in Jerusalem's Old City. Many Israelis believe an outside investigation, even one supported by the United States, would undermine Jerusalem's status as their capital.
We view it as a gross infringement on our sovereignty and our exclusive right under international law.
But the way Israel is firming its grip on the holy city is another source of friction with the United States. A plan just unveiled by Housing Minister Ariel Sharon calls for 6 new neighborhoods to be built for Soviet immigrants in predominantly Arab East Jerusalem. That would violate the terms of a $400 million housing loan guarantee in which Israel promised Washington it would not settle the immigrants in occupied land. The Israelis who annexed East Jerusalem 2 decades ago insist that no part of the city is occupied territory. If that breaks the loan deal, too bad. But Israeli opposition leader Shimon Peres today questioned a policy that snubs both the UN and the U.S. and makes Jerusalem an issue, when Baghdad and Saddam Hussein should be in focus.
We, with our own hands, instead to extinguish the fire, we are increasing the flames. What for?
If there is a sense of isolation in Israel's right-wing government tonight, few of the ministers seem to be bothered by it, nor by the fact that their stand could compound their country's problems. Dean Reynolds, ABC News, Jerusalem.
The United States is keeping up the pressure on Israel to change its position to comply with the terms of the UN resolution. Here's ABC's John McWethy.
There was no backing down by President Bush today when he was asked aboard Air Force One about Israel's refusal to cooperate with the UN.
We want to see that UN resolution fully implemented. We were a part of it, and we think it's the right step, so I'll just leave it there.
But the spokesperson at the State Department, Margaret Tutwiler, carried it one step further.
We are disappointed that the Israeli government has decided not to cooperate with the mission. In fact, we think that a failure to cooperate denies Israel an opportunity to present its case to the Secretary General.
In a private message over the weekend, Secretary Baker used far tougher words to urge Israeli Foreign Minister David Levy to receive the UN delegation. Baker told Levy that by not being prepared for Palestinian demonstrators, quote, Israel played into the hands of Saddam Hussein, thus drawing public attention away from Iraq. I wish to emphasize, Baker told Levy, that if you reject the Security Council's resolution, some will unfairly compare you to Saddam Hussein and his rejection of Security Council resolutions. To deal with the crisis in the Persian Gulf, President Bush has reached out to the Arab world as never before. This is shaking the relationship between the U.S. and Israel, as the two countries now see their best interests on some issues in sharply different terms. John McWethy, ABC News, the State Department.
At the beginning of the 11th week since Iraq invaded Kuwait, the standoff in the Persian Gulf remains that. Kuwaiti exiles meeting in Saudi Arabia expressed the hope that the world would take stronger action, and they mean military action against Saddam Hussein. That meeting in the Saudi city of Jeddah has also been concentrating on the need for political reform in Kuwait, if Kuwait is ever independent again. ABC's Bill Rediker reports from Jeddah.
They had come together, these prominent Kuwaitis, refugees without a nation, but hardly without means, to once again demand the return of their homeland from Saddam Hussein, and also to publicly proclaim their support for the ruling Kuwaiti family. But here in exile, frustration with the al-Sabah family has been allowed to surface. In closed sessions, opponents of the regime pressed their case for change. They argued that the all-powerful Emir has too much control, especially over Kuwait's $120 billion in foreign assets.
Liberating Kuwait is not liberating Kuwait for a man or a family. It's for the people.
To quiet such dissent, the Crown Prince negotiated a deal. Kuwait's parliament, dissolved by the Emir in 1986, would be revived. Free parliamentary elections would be held. Press censorship abolished. Women who cannot vote would play a greater role. Despite the pledge to restore some democratic institutions, many here remain skeptical, unwilling to forget years of domination by the Emir and his family.
I hope, and I sincerely hope, that there is no going back to the past.
I don't think that the government has any choice but to go back to the democracy and the Constitution.
That's because Kuwaitis know they cannot offend Western sensitivities now, or they'll lose Western support.
It has to be stated and restated so that people have no qualms or compunctions about committing themselves, their people and their government, to come to this area.
It ended tonight as Kuwait's ruling family wanted it to end, in a show of public solidarity. But then everyone seemed to agree it had to. Bill Redeker, ABC News, Jeddah, Saudi Arabia.
President Bush has finally compared Saddam Hussein to Adolf Hitler. In Texas, Mr. Bush was recounting Kuwaiti reports of two young men allegedly executed by Iraqi soldiers as their parents were forced to watch. The president warned that atrocities, Iraqi atrocities, could lead to trials similar to the Nuremberg war crimes trials after World War II. In a moment, the 1990 Nobel Peace Prize awarded to Mikhail Gorbachev, money for the fight against AIDS caught in the budget crunch, and remembering the man who taught so many Americans about music, Leonard Bernstein.
This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings, brought to you by AT&T.